The Sincerity glided through the velvet black expanse of space, its solar sails unfurled like the wings of a celestial matter ray, shimmering with the pale gold light of Tau Cetia. From the bridge's panoramic viewport, Ambassador Elena Kovac watched the twin suns of the Tau Ceti system rise over a distant planet. Bathing the ship's deck in an otherworldly glow, she inhaled slowly, tasting the recycled air of the flagship, a mixture of ozone, metallic undertones, and the faintest hint of the hydroponic gardens down in the lower decks. Tonight, she reminded herself, everything changed for nearly a human generation. The Orion Accord had pursued an alliance with the Zyrodia race of slender, crystalline-skinned xenotrafficators whose networks of trade spanned half the known galaxy. Their star lanes glittered with energy-beamed freighters and graviton-hitched cruisers, yet their inner world remained as opaque as dark matter. Now, the Accord's diplomats, scholars, and peacekeepers had come loaded with gifts of rare ores, medical nanotech, and most importantly the promise of shared knowledge. Elena had been chosen to lead the mission, not only for her fluency in Zyrati lexicon, but for her unshakable faith that even the most inscrutable cultures could be guided toward cooperation. The hum of the bridge consoles was both comforting and unnerving. Lieutenant Dara Chen, Elena's second-in-command, tapped at her console's holokeys. "Ambassador, we're receiving final clearance. Docking vectors aligned, magnetic clamps ready." Her voice was steady to steady, Elena thought, as though she wielded nerves of diamond rather than the more human mixture of hope and apprehension. Elena turned to the senior defense officer, Commander Alonso Reyes, whose gaunt features were half lost in the console's emerald glow. "Status report on security overlay." Reyes' brow furrowed. "Full spectrum scans show no active threats in the docking bay. Graviton polarity fields are stable. Defensive protocols are on standby. But until we have the Zyrati's final nod, we stand down all but non-lethal countermeasures." Elena nodded and allowed herself a small smile, all the more reason to avoid giving them cause for alarm. She returned to the viewport. Below them lay the colossal form of the Zyrati mothership, its hull and obsidian lattice crisscrossed with glowing filaments of bioluminescent crystal. It drifted like a sleeping leviathan, its organic curves suggesting a living organism more than a machine of war. A soft chime interrupted her reverie. The central transmitter flickered to life. A faceless silhouette appeared against a shifting curtain of violet light. "Sincerity, this is Captain Viren of the Zyrati vessel Umbra's Embrace. You are cleared to proceed to docking bay C4, a resonant voice intoned, as if vibrating through the hull itself. "Thank you, Captain Viren," Elena replied. Her voice measured. She steeled herself, then turned to her team. "Let's make history." The docking bay was vast, an amphitheater of gleaming stone-like alloy, ringed with gargantuan door portals carved with undulating glyphs that pulsed gently in time with the ship's pulse. As the Sincerity's gangway descended with a pneumatic hiss, Elena's heart thrummed in her chest. Behind her, the human delegation, linguists, cultural liaisons, xenobiologists, and a small escort of security marines followed information, silent and taut with anticipation. As they stepped through the threshold, warm, humid air washed over Elena's senses, dank as a rainforest, fragrant with exotic blooms that twisted and opened in the corridor's biogrowth panels. Overhead, crystalline stalactites glimmered, dripping phosphor sap into small basins that glowed like lanterns. The architecture was simultaneously alien and organic. Walls arched like rib cages, corridors branched like the veins of a living creature, and every surface hummed with latent energy. In the distance, the council chamber loomed, a cathedral-sized hall whose vaulted ceiling was a reflection pool of glittering starlight. 7 elevated days-like platforms formed a semicircle before a crystalline dais, where the Zyrati Council would convene. Elena felt her pulse accelerate. Each step toward that dais was a step into uncharted history. A procession of Zyrati, attendant stall, graceful figures draped in flowing robes of pearl-white silk emerged to greet them. Their triangular faces lacked the symmetry of human features. Instead, their multifaceted eyes glowed like opalescent gems, reflecting every nuance of the chamber's light. When they stepped aside, a hush rippled through the delegation. Elena, took a steadying breath and bowed in human fashion, hands pressed together at her chest. Head lowered, a ripple of laughter echoed through the hall, a crystalline, tinkling sound that reminded Elena of wind chimes caught in a storm. She steeled herself and rose, allowing the laughter to wash over her. At the center of the dais, a lithe figure detached from the others and glided forward, Counselor Jalzan, the youngest among them, his skin shimmering from sea green to violet as he regarded the humans through those gem-like eyes. Ambassador Elena Kovac, he intoned, his voice both soft and resonant. You come bearing gifts of metal and data, yet our records tell of your history of conflict, of your relentless consumption of resources. Tell us, why should we embrace this proposed accord? A silence heavier than an asteroid belt followed. Elena held her gaze, summoned her training. Esteemed Counselor Jalzan, she began, her voice steady. For centuries, humanity has pursued knowledge and expansion. Yes, we have erred, often at the expense of others, but we have also learned through hardship, through unity, that understanding, not conquest, ensures survival. Tonight, we offer you the greatest treasure we have uncovered, the lost archives of your sister world, Viridian Prime. Murmurs spread among the council, soft, curious, tinged with disbelief. Elena pressed a controller in her palm. A cascade of holodioramas blossomed in midair. Shattered obelisks reconstructed in crystalline clarity. Ancient ceremonies replayed in vivid three-dimensional tapestry. Corridors of marble palaces restored stone by stone. The image that held the room in crystalline silence was the Celestial Gate, a vast, monolithic archway carved with swirling glyphs, once believed to fold the very fabric of space. Counselor Jalzan's laughter died on his lips. His gem-like eyes widened, facets refracting the projection's light. The other 6 members leaned forward, their robes whispering against the polished floor. The diorama pulsed archaeological scans humanity had painstakingly pieced together, from drifted satellites, forgotten probes, and half-buried artifacts. Each rendering was accompanied by centuries of human analysis, cross-referenced with rival aliens' accounts. Breathing shallowly, Elena closed the presentation. These records were recovered from decaying orbital archives around Viridian Prime. We restored them out of respect for your history, and in the belief that no culture should vanish from memory. The chamber held its breath. The low hum of the walls settled into a soft cadence. Finally, Counselor Thalvrek, a dignified figure whose skin rippled between lavender and jade, spoke. Never have we believed another species would tend to our past with such meticulous care. You speak with humility, and perhaps with genuine purpose. Elena bowed again. Humility and purpose guide the accord. Let us build a shared future as rich as your storied past. Later, after the delegation was escorted to ceremonial quarters, Elena paused in a moonlit terrace overlooking the cosmos. Below, the tubular spines of the Umbra's embrace glowed faintly blue, and the ring of Tau Ceti B flickered like a distant emerald eye. She pressed her palm against the transparent alloy barrier, feeling the faint vibration of ion currents humming through it. Lieutenant Chen joined her, offering a steaming cup of synthesized tea that smelled of cinnamon and starflower. They laughed. Chen said softly, her eyes unreadable. They expected another display of bluster. You surprised them. Elena sipped the tea, warmth blooming in her chest. Trust is forged in truth, Dara. We offered ours. Now we wait to see if they return it. Behind them, the low murmur of Zyrati voices drifted out. Engineering crews comparing human and Zyrati graviton drive schematics. Historians debating translation of long-forgotten symbols. For the first time, Elena sensed the stirrings of genuine curiosity, possibly even collaboration. Yet beneath that hopeful veneer, a thread of unease wove through her thoughts. The corridors of the Umbra's embrace were vast and labyrinthine. She had glimpsed hooded figures slipping into unlit side passages, figures whose motives she could not read. Were they mere couriers of scrolls and oil-slicked machines, or harbingers of suspicion? Elena squared her shoulders. Tonight's victory was real but fragile. Diplomacy could open doors, but only vigilance could keep them open. She straightened her uniform and turned back toward the docking bay, where the human and Zyrati delegations would dine together. Beneath chandeliers of suspended crystal motes, that as she walked, The twin suns of Tau Ceti dipped below the horizon of the planet below, their light refracting into long, golden beams that traced across the ship's hull. In that fleeting glow, Elena dared to believe that laughter could become a bridge, and that the grand arrival of humanity might not end in folly, but in the dawn of an alliance that would echo through the stars. The next morning, the Umbra's embrace stirred with an energy far different from the cautious formality of the parley chamber. Here, in its heart, collaboration thrummed like a living thing. Elena Kovac moved through the gallery's hallways, lined with crystalline exhibits and holo-containers, accompanied by Counselor Thalvrek, whose shifting jade and lavender skin hinted at his conflicted awe. They paused before a suspended lattice of fractal crystals, each shard containing a snippet of Viridian Prime's language, a microscopic archive harvested from debris fields. Beneath the lattice, a holo-console flickered, displaying Roskin data alongside Xyrati logograms. A small team of human xenolinguists and Xyrati archivists bent over the controls, their voices rising and falling in a melodic debate. "See here," Thalvrek said, pointing with a delicate finger. "Your symbol for the concept of unity should map to our rune for convergence. They're nearly identical in root form." Elena leaned in. The human linguist, Dr. Marisol Vega, was already nodding eagerly. "Exactly. But we think the Viridian glyph and its archaic context carries a secondary meaning of sacrifice, which has no direct equivalent in modern Xyrati." A hush fell as Thalvrek's skin dimmed to a thoughtful turquoise. "Fascinating. Viridian culture prized collective sacrifice above all, offering one's life to safeguard the many. We have lost that nuance in our translations." Elena smiled at the spark of discovery in his eyes. "And tonight, we hope your council will accept our shared understanding as the foundation for true concord." Thalvrek inclined his head, then gestured them onward. They passed through a broad archway into the atrium of Echoes, an enormous circular space, whose translucent walls curved outward like the interior of a seashell. Embedded sensors captured footsteps, voices, even heartbeats, replaying them in soft, rippling soundscapes that transformed each whisper into gentle harmonies. Here, human engineers and Xyrati technomancers gathered around a series of consoles, comparing graviton drive schematics. Elena watched as Lieutenant Chen explained a human stabilization algorithm, her fingers tracing lines in midair. Opposite her, a Xyrati engineer named Lysa turned charts of human hyperwave modulation into crystalline projections, rotating them until Chen's algorithm fit perfectly into Lysa's framework. Elena felt a thrill of pride. This was the promise of the Accord, the melding of two vastly different technologies into something greater than the sum of its parts. Yet beneath her excitement, she could not ignore the tension knotting her stomach. The atrium's echoing harmonies sounded eerily like laughter, and around its periphery, she noticed figures slipping away into side passages, shadowy silhouettes that vanished before she could approach them. She caught Thalvrek's eye and nodded toward the darker arch at the atrium's edge. He followed her gaze, his luminous skin pulsing. "You sense it, too," he murmured. Elena lowered her voice. "I've seen those shapes throughout the ship, ghosts in the corridors. Someone doesn't want this partnership to succeed." Thalvrek's facets dimmed to a stormy violet. "There are old wounds in our ranks, exiles who blame your people for Viridian's fall. They believe no bargain can heal centuries of loss. Together, they stepped into the shadow-lit corridor. The bioluminescent veins embedded in the walls glowed softly, revealing hieroglyphs that hinted at forbidden rites and ancient prophecies. At the far end, half concealed behind a curved pillar, they found a Xyrati engineer, shoulders hunched as he whispered into a private comm. Elena cleared her throat. "I apologize for the interruption, but I'm Ambassador Kovac." The engineer sprang upright, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Diplomat," he spat. "You know nothing of our pain." He hustled down the corridor, robe trailing, and disappeared around a corner. Thalvrek placed a gentle hand on Elena's arm. "Let him go. We cannot chase shadows in every turn, but we will remain vigilant." Elena nodded, though her heart pounded. If rogue elements of the Xyrathi, those who once called themselves the children of Viridian, were at work, they could sabotage the Accord before it even began. By midday, the laughter returned, this time in earnest, in the Grand Observatory. a dome-shaped chamber overlooking the rings of Tau Ceti B. Two human xenobiologists and a Xyrati archivist clustered around a centrifuge-like hologram. Around them, the observatory's glass-like panels transformed into screens, displaying swirling nebulae and distant star clusters. Shadows shifted as the panorama tracked the slow rotation of nearby gas giants. Dr. Jahan Malik, a human xenobotanist, chuckled as a Xyrati archivist, Siralun, performed a literal translation of an ancient Viridian nursery rhyme, a playful chant about lunar moths that glow in the jungles of Viridian Prime. With apologies, Siralun said, her many-jointed fingers tracing the syllables in midair, but your accent. She trailed off as both she and Malik dissolved into laughter, the sound resonating through the obsidian floor. Elena watched from the entrance, a soft smile tugging at her lips. The moment was precious, two species, so different in form and language, sharing simple joy. Lieutenant Chen joined her, eyes shining. Look at them. No formal titles, no wary glances, just curiosity. They are the best proof that this can work, Elena replied. Yet even as she spoke, her gaze shifted back to the crystal's edge where a flicker of movement caught her eye. A Xyrati figure slipping through a service hatch behind the hydroponic gardens. This one wore no robe, only the utilitarian uniform of a security operative. Whatever his mission, it was not to nurture relationships. She tapped Chen's shoulder. I'm going to investigate. Keep them occupied. Chen nodded and returned to the scientists, who greeted her with broad smiles. Elena slipped through the archway into the hydroponic wing walls lined with bioluminescent ferns and floating seed pods that drifted in suspended microgravity. The air here was thick with oxygen and the sweet tang of alien pollen. Beyond the greenery, maintenance corridors branched like the roots of an ancient tree. She followed a trail of faint footprints, dark smudges of recycled bionexus fluid, until she reached a junction guarded by a pressure-sealed door. A small keypad glowed. Beside it, its runic symbols shifting through Xyrati script. Without pausing, Elena tapped the console with the override code she had memorized in emergency backchannel that Captain Viren had reluctantly shared for precisely such a breach. The door slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel lit only by red emergency strips. Inside, she found the operative crouched beside a grav packer that hummed with unstable energy. He was inserting a cylindrical device no larger than a power cell into the pack's core coupling. Stop, Elena called, drawing her sidearm. The operative froze, but did not raise his hands. Instead, his multifaceted eyes flashed venomous gold. You have no right, he hissed in Xyrati. This alliance kills our honor. Elena pressed the weapon closer. You would kill innocents to stop peace. Is that your honor? He laughed, a low, crackling sound like breaking crystal. Until you understand our sorrow, you cannot bargain for our souls. With a violent jerk, he yanked the device free, discarded it toward an exit hatch, then lunged at Elena. She sidestepped, firing a stun round that struck his shoulder. He cried out and staggered back against the tunnel wall. Elena deactivated her weapon and spoke softly. I offered you respect and remembrance of your past. Why would you destroy that gift? The operative's shoulders sagged, and the harsh lines of his mandibles softened. He shook his head. I cannot forgive. A klaxon blared through the tunnel, a ship-wide alert. Security teams flooded in, weapons drawn. The operative sagged to his knees, surrendering. Elena lowered her weapon, relief washing through her. As he was led away, she exhaled a shaky breath. Peace must be guarded, she whispered to the empty corridor. By vigilance, yes, but also by mercy. That evening, the grand banqueting hall glittered with suspended crystal motes and the slow dance of holographic ribbons. Long tables bore platters of exotic fruits, nutrient-rich ambrosia, and Xyrati delicacies whose flavors bloomed with shimmering textures. Human and Xyrati delegates sat side by side, toasting the dawn of a new alliance. Elena rose to address the assembly. Beside her stood Thalvrek and Captain Viren, their united presence a testament to cooperation. The hall hushed as Elena raised her glass of luminescent wine. Esteemed friends, she began, voice firm yet warm, today we share laughter, knowledge, and our dreams for tomorrow. We know that history has scars. We know that trust can be fragile. But if we protect this moment, if we cherish it more than our doubts, then we can build a future where our children look back on this day not as the end of suspicion, but the beginning of unity. Glasses chimed. The laughter that followed was genuine this time, enforced, bright, and filled with hopeful promise. All at once, the past's shadows seemed to recede, and for a fleeting heartbeat, Elena dared to believe that diplomacy had prevailed. Yet as she scanned the crowd, her eyes flicked to the far corner, where the Xyrati operative, now unmasked, sat under guard. His eyes did not meet hers. They stared at the swirling patterns on the ceiling. Beneath his resignation burned a flame of resentment, a reminder that for every bridge built, there remained one more barrier to cross. The dawn glow of Tausetia filtered through the ribbed windows of the Xyrati council chamber, turning the crystalline filigree of the ceiling into a prism of violet, teal, and gold. But inside, the air crackled not with hope, but with dread. The chamber's grand semicircle of dazed platforms stood silent, empty, and the human delegation found itself ushered into an emergency session, without ceremony, their footsteps echoing ominously against the polished alloy floors. Ambassador Elena Kovac halted at the threshold, greeting Counselor Njmal, his translucent skin pulsing a harsh scarlet. "What's happened?" she asked, voice low. Njmal's multifaceted eyes reflected consternation. "At first, we thought a glitch, an errant probe scan, but the gravimetric sentries detected an enormous ship appearing unannounced. At the outer edge of our system." He gestured to a darkened holoconsole at the chamber's center. With a flick of his slender wrist, the silvery floor split open, and a three-dimensional projection of a sleek, angular warship rose into view. It was shaped like a claw, poised to strike, its hull matte black, devoid of any transponder signature, serrated fins jutting from its sides like talons. At the prow, a glowing slit of crimson light pulsed ominously. The council's youngest, Jalzan, hovered beside the console. His iridescent skin had drained to ash gray. "We have no record of this vessel in any ledger, no diplomatic code, no hailing channels, only this." He ran a translation line across the ship's hull, and a single phrase appeared in bright red Xyrati script: "Knight's Talon." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Elena felt her blood run cold. She had heard the rumors whispered in backwater station stories of an exiled Xyrati fleet commander allied with human mercenaries, marauding border systems in a crusade against any sign of peace. They called it a myth, a tavern tale to scare children. Yet here, in living holodetail, that myth had come to life. Captain Viren's voice crackled urgently through the chamber's commnet. "All non-essential personnel, clear the floor. Battle stations." His tone left no room for debate. Elena's heart pounded. She turned to Thalvrek, whose skin shifted through stormy indigos. "What is their vector?" she demanded. He tapped the console. "They orbit above Tauseti B's moon, an abandoned research outpost. They're using the old Viridian dark matter repeater array to jam our comms and feed false signals into our sensors." A stunned silence fell. Elena recalled the moon, once a neutral site for clandestine experiments into zero-point energy, abandoned after the celestial sundering. Now, its relic arrays had become the backbone of an unheard-of threat. Njmal's multifaceted eyes flared. "They meant to trap us here, to sever our lifeline to the Council's defense fleets." He jabbed a crystalline finger at the holoship. "They expected us to cower. They expected diplomacy to fail." Elena swallowed. "Then we'll show." Then they were wrong. She met Viren on the comm. "Captain, how soon can we mount a counterstrike?" The chamber dimmed as all lights focused on the central holoconsole. A countdown timer appeared. T3 hours 17 minutes and 42 seconds to satellite blackout. In just over 3 hours, the moon's repeater array would plunge the system into electronic silence. "Impossible to mobilize our fleets before the jam begins," Viren replied. "We need a surgical strike, small craft, light-footed teams, to breach the array, disable the jamming nodes. But the Knight's Talon holds position to cover any approach with long-range quantum disruptors." Elena took a breath, steel hardening in her chest. "Then we take a shuttle fast and go in unnoticed. If we can sever the array's power conduit, the jamming field collapses." Our forces can then arrive. Thalvrek's eyes glowed with tempered fury. I will escort you myself, he offered. I know the layout of the old outpost. She inclined her head. Thank you. Gather your best engineers and prepare for insertion. 2 hours later, the human Xyrati strike team launched in 3 sleek shuttles. Cutting through the umbral gases that shrouded the moon, Elena sat between Thalvrek and Lieutenant Dara Chen. The console's readouts flickering red as they pierced the night's talon's jamming perimeter. Beyond, the horizon of the moon loomed an expanse of fractured ice plains and jagged canyons. The repeater array is located at Site Sigma, Northwest Ridge, Thalvrek murmured, leaning close. Built into the leftover ruins of a Viridian research lab, the corridors are maze-like, caution advised. Elena watched the instruments. Sensor ghosts danced at the edge of detection, likely decoy drones. She closed her eyes for a moment, summoning focus. Once we breach the main dome, she said, engineers run to the power hub. We'll cover them. A sudden jolt threw her forward. Warning klaxons shrieked. They're targeting us, Chen shouted. Tracking beams of pulsed energy slashing. Across the shields, Thalvrek engaged the shuttle's inertial compensators, evasive maneuvers. He commanded. The shuttle gyrated in microgravity, streaking through the void as blasts scorched its hull. Elena glanced back at the Knight's Talon, its silhouette yawning larger against the cosmos. Behind them, the second shuttle erupted in a fiery bloom of plasma. A scream crackled through the comm before cutting off. Chen's face paled. We can't hold much longer, Elena gritted her teeth. Then we go and fast, no more shields. She activated the shuttle's cloaking drive. The world, dimmed as wave-patterned fields, shimmered into place, bending light around them. Punch the thrusters, she ordered. Straight to the canyon's mouth. Site Sigma is just beyond. They descended into the icy maw, the frigid wind whistles crashing against the hull. The shuttle's sensors flickered back on as the jamming field dimmed inside the canyon. The repeater's footprint was weaker. They breached the canyon rim, hurtling toward a domed structure half buried in snowdrift and met by skeletal remains of Viridian pylons. The shuttle touched down. With a bone-rattling thud, the ramp descended into darkness. Elena drew her sidearm. Beside her, Xyrati honor guards readied their crystalline staves. Thalvrek's voice was a low rumble. Stay close. Signal when you've isolated the conduit. They moved like specters through the corridors of the lab walls carved with faded runes of Viridian science, illuminated by the soft glow of emergency lights. A distant hum droned as the dark matter reactor thrummed at the dome's heart. Dozens of guards, human mercenaries, and exiled Xyrati marched in patrols, their voices harsh in the echoing halls. Elena signaled. 2 engineers fanned out, silently, magnetic boots gripping icy metal. Each carried a grav drill and a disruptor pack designed to overload the array's core. The rest of the team shadowed them, weapons primed. At the portal to the reactor chamber, a squad of mercenaries sealed the door. One twisted a code key to slow. Chen shot the lock with a quantum pulse, and the door splintered inward. They poured through in a burst of controlled violence. Stun grenades bloomed, mercenaries crumpled, and in the flickering red light, the engineers darted ahead. Elena covered their flank, firing stun bolts into shadowed corners. But as the doors slammed shut behind them, a steel scream echoed through the chute. Through the reinforced glass of the control alcove, she saw the Knight's Talon itself descending into orbit above, its disruptor ray glowing sickly green. A console blinked countdown to system lockdown. T0 hours 12 minutes and 7 seconds. 12 minutes until the jamming would sever their link to command. Heart pounding, Elena pressed her palm to the glass. The engineers worked feverishly on the conduit manifold, cables of shimmering black, spooled into the reactor's core. Each connection port required a perfect resonance pulse to fracture the link without triggering a meltdown. Thalvrek's crystalline staff glowed as he translated the Viridian runes etched around the conduit. Now focus on the central node. Elena turned to Chen, who nodded grimly. On your mark. Together. The 3 converged on the node. Elena triggered the disruptor pack. A staccato charge leapt along the conduits. The hum stuttered, and the dome's interior lights strobed. Outside, The lab rumbled as the repeater's massive power coils ground to a halt. On the holo console beside Elena, the countdown flickered and froze, jamming field offline. A cheer erupted from the corridor speakers, a raw, joyful sound that trembled the reinforced walls. But the relief was fleeting. Alarms blared as the reactor core overload protocols kicked in, triggering a cascading shutdown. Valvrek shouted. Above the din, "We must evacuate now." They sprinted back through the corridors as the dome began to collapse. Ice and shards of crystal rained down. Elena vaulted over a fallen bulkhead, pain lancing in her side where a shard grazed her uniform. Bursting into the canyon's biting wind, they saw the shuttles arriving, unshielded, but too fast for the Knight's Talon's disruptors. Engines flared, and the strike team piled aboard. As the shuttle lifted, Elena watched the lab rupture behind them, a geyser of light and debris erupting into the sky. Above them, the Sincerity and Xyrati cruisers jumped into the system, their weapons arrayed. The Knight's Talon held position, its disruptors powerless without the repeater. For a moment, the two great powers faced each other across the void. Through the comm, Viren's voice boomed, "All units engage, free our allies. Show the rogue fleet that diplomacy has teeth." Elena pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her pulse pound like a drum. The war was no longer a myth. It had come to call upon them, and she vowed that when the next clash came, they would answer with every ounce of courage and unity they had fought to build. The void trembled as the first volleys of energy lanced out from the Sincerity and its allied cruisers, cutting through the swirling debris of Tau Ceti B's shattered moon. Elena Kovac stood on the bridge of Sincerity, her uniform smeared with ice dust and reactor splash residue. Before her, the Knight's Talon, that dark leviathan of whispered legend, hovered like a predatory moon, its matte black hull absorbing every photon, every hope of mercy. Shields are holding at 70%, Commander Reyes reported, fingers dancing over his console. But their quantum disruptors are overwhelming our point defenses. Elena nodded, eyes fixed on the looming silhouette of the rogue ship. Divert all auxiliary power to the forward batteries. We need a concentrated strike. Beside her, Captain Viren's spectral form flickered through the comm chain. Our cruisers are vulnerable, he murmured, voice low as though in counsel rather than command. But there is a weak spot near the mounting pylons that support their disruptor ray. A surgical volley could disable it. Elena glanced across at him, determination blazing in her gray-blue eyes. Do it, and prepare boarding parties. Below, in the moored shuttle bay, Xyrati honor guards and human marines readied their packs. Among them, Elena's strike team, rebuilt and reinforced after their daring raid on the repeater ray, stood shoulder to shoulder. Lieutenant Chen checked cartridges in her sidearm. Valvrek's crystalline staff hummed with focused energy. The engineers clutched grav drills and resonance disruptors. Elena addressed them in the dim red light. We've broken their power source once. Now we return the favor, but this time we take the fight to them, disable their disruptors, board their command deck, and bring this nightmare to an end. Trust in each other, trust in diplomacy's shield as much as in your weapons. Let's go. A synchrony of nods, half-nervous laughter, and whispered prayers. They embarked aboard for sleek assault shuttles loaded with EMP charges, magnetic, grappling anchors, and sedative darts. The bay doors slid open, and they launched into the storm of battle, weaving through tracer fire and plasma arcs dot above. The Sincerity unleashed its batteries. Brilliant streaks of violet and silver arced across space to strike the Knight's Talon's pylons. One by one, the disruptor mounts sparked and flickered, then fell silent. The great ship shuddered, its horns of resonance dimming, and the jamming field collapsed in a shimmering wave. Now Elena shouted into the comm, boarding Protocol Alpha. Her shuttle dove beneath the Talon's hull. Grappling anchors latched onto armored struts with a thunderous clang. The boarding ramp discharged, unfolding like a razor-edged wing. Elena led the charge across the threshold, boots clattering against the obsidian floor of the enemy's hangar bay. Inside, the Knight's Talon was a cathedral of shadows and steel walls, ribbed with serrated conduits, bulkheads etched with the warlike sigils of its exiled commanders. Rogue Xyrati and mercenary humans scrambled to arms, their faces a mask of fanaticism. Valvrek advanced with his staff, unfurling a cascade of crystalline energy that struck to assailants like fractured glass. Chen covered the rear, picking off snipers perched atop catwalks. Engines of Justice, a ragtag band of human marines, pressed forward under Elena's command. Split into teams, she ordered. Team 1 with me command deck. Team 2 secures the engine core. Corridors hissed as they advanced through the heart of the Talon. Elena hacked open electrified bulkhead doors, revealing a labyrinth of control rooms and detention cells. Inside one, prisoner Zyrati scientists and human diplomats lay unconscious under sedative darts. Elena, knelt by Counselor Jalzan, roused him gently. "We're here," she promised. "You're safe." Beyond the cells, the corridor branched toward the command deck. 2 guards rounded the corner, and Elena tossed a compact stun grenade. The corridor glowed with a soft azure pulse, and the guards fell, crumpling silently. She motioned her team onward. They emerged onto an observation mezzanine overlooking the bridge, an apex of jagged consoles and holoprojectors swirling with star map projections. At its center stood the rogue Captain Commander Vraxes, the exiled Zyrati, whose betrayal had birthed the Knight's Talon. His armor bore scorch marks from their earlier strike, and in his gauntlet, a fusion pistol glowed with lethal intent. "Elena, Kovac," he hissed, mandibles twitching. "You dare invade my domain." Elena pressed forward, sidearm leveled. "This ends now. Lower your weapon, Vraxes, or we will bring you down." Vraxes laughed, a grating harmony that echoed off the obsidian walls. "You speak of diplomacy while hiding behind rifles." He raised his pistol and time slowed. In that breathless flash, Valvrek's staff flared, projecting a shield of prismatic energy that deflected the fusion blast. Chen fired a precision dart that struck Vraxes' shoulder, his armor sparking. As he staggered back, Elena advanced, seizing the fusion pistol from his grip and tossing it aside. "Your rage is ended," she said, voice calm yet unyielding. "Surrender yourself to justice, or we will make you face trial alongside your allies." Vraxes snarled, eyes burning, but he saw his officers' once fanatical lieutenants shrinking away under the combined might of human and Zyrati forces. His fury faltered, and he fell to one knee. "I surrender." At Elena's nod, chains sprung from the console floor, binding his wrists in tremoring metal cuffs. The bridge alarms ceased, replaced by the triumphant chime of restored command protocols. Moments later, aboard the Sincerity, Elena watched as the captive Knight's Talon descended into a holding bay. A prize of peace secured by force, counselors and diplomats stood beside her. Jalzan's crystalline facets shone with reluctant admiration. Valvrek's skin rippled through soft greens of vindication. Captain Viren approached, his stoic presence offering a rare, genuine smile. "Diplomacy, when backed by unity and resolve, can turn the tide of war," he said. "You have proven it today, Ambassador." Elena allowed herself a tired but triumphant grin. "We offered them a future. When they answered with violence, we returned only necessity and then mercy." Jalzan stepped forward, lifting a crystalline goblet filled with violet-hued nectar. "To Ambassador Kovac and her people," he intoned, "who showed that even the darkest ship can be turned from its course." They drank, the crystalline hall ringing with hopeful laughter and a shared sense of victory. In the distant viewport, the battered but unbroken Knight's Talon rotated gently, its hull now a hollow testament to what greed and fear could build and what unity could dismantle. As Elena watched the stars shimmer in the warped sky of Tau Ceti B, she realized that the true dangerous ship was not the vessel of war but the vessel of distrust itself. Today, they had seized its helm and set it back to the course of peace. And in that moment, the laughter that once mocked diplomacy became the joyous refrain of a new age, carried on solar winds across the galaxy.